Bank throws out black customer, only to realize he's actually the CEO. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt the weight of judgment before you even opened your mouth? That invisible force that seems to measure your worth in milliseconds, deciding whether you belong or should be watched with suspicion. The morning sun cuts through the glass facade of First National Bank's downtown branch, casting long shadows across polished marble floors. The building stands like a monument to success, towering, pristine, and intimidating in its perfection. Inside, the air hums with the quiet efficiency of money being moved, decisions being made, and lives being changed with the stroke of a pen. Malik Jefferson steps through the revolving doors at exactly 10:47 a.m. He moves with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from years of commanding boardrooms and closing multi-million-dollar deals. His charcoal grey suit is perfectly tailored, his leather briefcase worn just enough to suggest it's been to important places, and his presence fills the space without demanding attention. At 43, Malik has learned that true power whispers rather than shouts, but none of that registers with the young receptionist behind the gleaming reception desk. Sarah Mitchell looks up from her computer screen, her smile freezing mid-formation as her eyes take in Malik's appearance. The practiced warmth she reserves for the bank's typical clientele, older, whiter, and predictably familiar, evaporates like morning mist. Her fingers hover over her keyboard as she watches him approach, and something cold settles in her chest. "Good morning," Malik says, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "I have a scheduled meeting with your branch manager regarding the Jefferson Group acquisition." Sarah's brow furrows slightly. The Jefferson Group acquisition. She'd heard whispers about it all week. Some major corporate takeover that had the senior staff walking on eggshells and speaking in hushed tones. But this man, standing here in his expensive suit, doesn't look like what she imagined a corporate executive would look like. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" she asks, her tone already shifting toward something cooler, more guarded. Malik's smile remains patient, though something flickers behind his eyes, the first shadow of recognition that this interaction isn't going to unfold as smoothly as it should. The Jefferson Group acquisition meeting. "I'm here to finalize the paperwork with Mr. Davidson." Behind the reception desk, Sarah's colleague, Jenny Walsh, glances over with barely concealed curiosity. The two women exchange a look that lasts only seconds, but carries the weight of unspoken assumptions. Jenny's eyebrows raise slightly, and she leans closer to her monitor, as if suddenly very busy, though her attention remains fixed on the conversation unfolding mere feet away. "And you are?" Sarah asks, her fingers now drumming against her desk with nervous energy. "Malik Jefferson." The name hangs in the air like a challenge. Sarah's eyes narrow slightly as she scans her appointment calendar, her movements deliberately slow and thorough. The seconds stretch into an uncomfortable silence, filled only by the soft murmur of other conversations and the distant sound of keyboards clicking. From his position near the marble pillar, security guard Tom Rodriguez notices the interaction. 22 years on the job have given him an instinct for when situations might need his attention, and something about the receptionist's body language sets off quiet alarms in his mind. He shifts slightly, angling himself for a better view while maintaining the casual stance that makes him appear uninterested. "I don't see any Jefferson Group meeting on the schedule," Sarah announces, her voice carrying just a hint of satisfaction, as if she's solved a puzzle. "Are you sure you have the right branch?" Malik's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. He's navigated enough corporate politics and social landmines to recognize when someone is being deliberately obtuse. His briefcase shifts in his grip as he maintains his composure, though the temperature in his voice drops several degrees. "I spoke with Mr. Davidson personally yesterday evening. The meeting was confirmed for 11 o'clock. He glances at his watch, a vintage Rolex that cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. "I'm a few minutes early, but I'm happy to wait." Sarah's eyes linger on the watch, then travel back to Malik's face with undisguised skepticism. In her mind, the pieces don't fit. Expensive suit or not, something feels wrong about this scenario. Important business meetings don't happen with people who look like, well, like him. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify this with management," she says, reaching for her phone with exaggerated care. "We take security very seriously here." The word security cuts through the ambient noise like a blade. Conversations at nearby desks pause momentarily as heads turn toward the reception area. Tom Rodriguez straightens, his hand instinctively moving toward his radio. Other customers in the waiting area, an elderly white woman reading financial documents, a middle-aged businessman checking his phone, glance up with the kind of casual curiosity that quickly transforms into something more charged when they see Malik standing there, briefcase in hand, while security protocols are being discussed. Malik feels the shift in the room's energy like a change in atmospheric pressure. Every eye that lands on him carries the same assumption, the same quiet suspicion. He's been here before, not in this bank, but in this moment, the moment when respectability meets prejudice and loses. "Of course," he says quietly, setting his briefcase down beside his feet with deliberate calm. "Take all the time you need." But even as he speaks those words with perfect politeness, Malik Jefferson knows that time is about to become his enemy. In the space between Sarah's suspicious phone call and whatever comes next, the careful order of his mourning and possibly his faith in basic human decency is about to unravel in ways that will leave everyone in this pristine marble temple of commerce questioning everything they thought they knew about power, prejudice, and the price of assumptions. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If this story reminds you of something you've experienced, share your experience in the comments. It might touch someone's heart today. Now take a deep breath and prepare yourself for a journey that might change how you see the world. Because what Malik Jefferson doesn't know is that his quiet dignity is about to be tested in ways that will reveal the true character of everyone in that room, including his own. Sarah's phone call crackles with hushed urgency as she speaks to someone in the back office, her voice deliberately low, but her eyes never leaving Malik. The conversation lasts longer than necessary, long enough for whispers to begin spreading through the branch like ripples across still water. "There's someone here claiming to have a meeting about the Jefferson Group thing," Sarah murmurs into the receiver, her hand cupped around the mouthpiece. "But I don't know. Something doesn't feel right." From her desk 3 feet away, Jenny Walsh has abandoned all pretense of working. Her computer screen displays a spreadsheet she hasn't touched in 5 minutes, while her attention remains laser-focused on the unfolding drama. She leans toward her neighbor, Marcus Chen, a loan officer who's been with the bank for 8 years. "Did you see him walk in?" Jenny whispers, her voice barely audible but loaded with implication. "Just appeared out of nowhere with that briefcase." Marcus glances toward Malik, who stands with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the bank's wall of achievement awards with apparent interest. There's something unsettling about the man's calmness, Marcus thinks. Most people would be fidgeting by now, showing some sign of nervousness or impatience, but this guy just stands there like he owns the place. "Probably another one of those scam artists," Jenny continues, her words disguised as concern but dripping with assumption. "You know how they operate, dress up nice, use official-sounding language, try to get access to sensitive information." The elderly woman in the waiting area, Dorothy Hamilton, adjusts her reading glasses and peers over her financial documents. She's been banking here for 37 years, long enough to recognize when the staff is on edge. The young man by the pillar, well-dressed certainly, but there's something about the situation that makes her clutch her purse a little tighter. Tom Rodriguez speaks quietly into his radio, his words lost in static, but his body language clear. Within moments, his partner, Officer Kevin Walsh, no relation to Jenny, despite the shared surname, emerges from the corridor leading to the administrative offices. Kevin is younger, newer to security work, and eager to prove himself worthy of Tom's mentorship. "What's the situation?" Kevin asks, his voice carrying just a bit too far across the marble floor. Tom nods toward Malik. "Gentleman claims to have a meeting about some acquisition deal. Reception can't verify it." Kevin's eyes narrow as he studies Malik's profile. Acquisition deal? That's pretty high-level stuff. His skepticism is palpable, seasoned with the kind of suspicion that comes from too many action movies and not enough real-world experience. Meanwhile, Malik continues his patient wait, though the muscles in his shoulders have begun to tighten. He can feel the weight of surveillance, the way conversations have shifted around him, how the normal flow of bank business has slowed to accommodate this new center of attention. His phone buzzes softly. A text from his assistant. "Regional Director confirms 11 a.m. arrival, all documents ready for signing." Malik glances at his watch, 10:52 a.m. 8 minutes until his scheduled meeting, and the atmosphere around him has thickened like fog before a storm. Sarah finally ends her phone call, her expression grim with newfound authority. She approaches Malik with the measured steps of someone who believes they're about to solve a problem. "Sir, I've spoken with management, and we don't have any record of your appointment," she announces, her voice pitched loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Mr. Davidson is in meetings all morning with our regional director about sensitive corporate matters." The words hang in the air like an accusation. Malik's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, but his voice remains steady. "As I mentioned, I spoke with Mr. Davidson yesterday evening. Perhaps there was a miscommunication with your scheduling system." "Our scheduling system is very reliable," Sarah replies, the implication clear. "We're going to need to ask you to wait outside while we sort this out." The businessman checking his phone, David Kruger, a local real estate developer, looks up with unconcealed interest. He's seen this movie before, though usually it plays out in his own office buildings when people who don't belong try to access areas above their station. His expression carries the satisfaction of someone watching social order being maintained. Kevin Walsh steps forward, his hand resting casually on his radio. "Sir, we're going to need you to step outside while we verify your appointment." Malik's eyes move slowly from Kevin to Tom to Sarah, reading the room with the precision of someone who's navigated corporate hierarchies for 2 decades. He recognizes the moment when reason gives way to prejudice, when professionalism becomes performance. "I understand your need for security protocols," Malik says, his voice carrying the kind of controlled authority that comes from years of boardroom negotiations. "However, I have a confirmed appointment, and I'll wait here until Mr. Davidson is available." The refusal to comply sends a visible ripple through the staff. Jenny Walsh's eyes widen slightly. She's never seen someone simply decline a security request. Marcus Chen shifts uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly aware that his spreadsheet has become irrelevant to whatever is unfolding. Tom Rodriguez feels the situation escalating beyond normal parameters. In his experience, legitimate business people don't usually push back against reasonable security measures. They apologize, show additional identification, make phone calls to verify their appointments. They don't stand their ground with the quiet confidence of someone who believes the rules don't apply to them. "Sir," Tom says, his voice carrying the weight of 22 years of authority, "I'm going to need you to comply with our request. This is private property, and we have the right to ask you to wait outside." Dorothy Hamilton watches from her chair, her newspaper forgotten. There's something unsettling about the whole scene. Not just the obvious tension, but the way the staff seems so certain, so unified in their suspicion. In her 37 years of banking here, she's never seen anything quite like this. Malik looks directly at Tom, and for a moment something passes between them, a recognition of mutual respect between two men who understand authority and responsibility. But the moment fractures when Kevin Walsh steps closer, his youth and eagerness transforming what could have been a reasonable conversation into something more confrontational. "You need to leave now," Kevin says, his voice carrying an edge that makes other customers turn their heads. "We can call the police if necessary." The word police cuts through the bank's refined atmosphere like a siren. Conversations stop entirely now. The elderly woman clutches her purse tighter. The businessman's phone call ends abruptly. Even the tellers behind their protective glass pause their transactions to watch. Malik Jefferson stands in the center of it all, his expensive briefcase at his feet, his tailored suit impeccable, his dignity intact, but under assault. He knows that his next words will determine whether this situation de-escalates into reasonable conversation or explodes into something that will change every person in this room. But what none of them realize, not Sarah with her suspicious scheduling, not the security guards with their protocols, not the customers with their assumptions, is that in exactly 4 minutes, everything they think they know about power, authority, and who belongs where is about to be turned completely upside down. The silence that follows Kevin's ultimatum stretches like a taut wire ready to snap. Malik Jefferson stands perfectly still, his dark eyes moving slowly across the faces surrounding him, each one a study in assumption and judgment. The morning light streaming through the bank's windows seems to spotlight this moment, casting everything in sharp relief. "I see," Malik says quietly, his voice carrying a weight that makes several people shift uncomfortably. "You're asking me to leave because you cannot verify an appointment that was made directly with your branch manager." Sarah's chin lifts defensively. "We're asking you to leave because you're disrupting our business operations and making our customers uncomfortable." The accusation lands like a slap, making customers uncomfortable. The phrase echoes through the marble-lined space, and Malik feels its familiar sting, the casual way his very presence is transformed into a threat, his professional demeanor recast as suspicious behavior. Dorothy Hamilton, still clutching her purse, finds herself studying Malik's face. There's something in his expression, not anger exactly, but a kind of profound disappointment that makes her stomach twist with unease. She's seen that look before, though she struggles to remember where. David Kruger, the real estate developer, checks his watch with theatrical impatience. "Look, if he doesn't have an appointment, why are we all standing around?" His voice carries the casual authority of someone accustomed to having his opinions matter. "Some of us have actual business to conduct." The comment draws nods from other customers, a collective agreement that validates the staff's position. Malik notices how quickly the room has divided, them versus him, legitimate versus suspicious, belonging versus not belonging. It's a dance he's seen performed countless times, though he'd hoped those days were behind him. Kevin Walsh steps closer, emboldened by the crowd's apparent support. "Sir, you need to leave now. We can escort you out, or you can walk yourself. Your choice." Tom Rodriguez feels something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. 2 decades of security work have taught him to read people, and something about this situation doesn't add up. The man is too calm, too composed, too dignified for someone trying to run a scam. But the momentum has shifted beyond his control, and Kevin's aggressive stance has backed everyone into a corner. "I'll walk," Malik says, his voice carrying a quiet resignation that somehow sounds more dangerous than anger. He reaches down for his briefcase, his movements deliberate and controlled. "But I want to be very clear about what's happening here." He straightens, and suddenly the room feels smaller, as if his presence has expanded to fill every corner. "I came here for a legitimate business meeting. I provided my name, explained my purpose, and waited patiently while you verified my appointment. Instead of professionalism, I've been met with suspicion, hostility, and assumptions about my character based on nothing more than my appearance." Sarah's face flushes red. "That's not, don't you?" Malik's interruption is soft, but cuts through her protests like a blade. Then tell me, when was the last time you asked a white businessman in an expensive suit to wait outside while you verified his appointment? The question hangs in the air like an accusation no one wants to touch. Jenny Walsh looks down at her hands. Marcus Chen suddenly finds his computer screen fascinating. Even David Kruger's impatient expression falters slightly. Kevin Walsh's jaw tightens. Sir, you need to stop making this about race and just leave the premises. I'm not making this about race, Malik replies, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. You already did that when you decided I didn't belong here. He moves toward the door, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor with the rhythm of a funeral march. Each step seems to carry weight beyond the physical, and the silence that follows him is thick with discomfort. As he passes Dorothy Hamilton, she finds herself looking up into his face. What she sees there, dignity mixed with pain, strength wrapped around disappointment, makes her breath catch. This isn't the face of someone trying to deceive or manipulate. This is the face of someone who expected better and received worse. Excuse me, she says quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Malik pauses, looking down at her with genuine surprise. In all the tension and hostility, he hadn't expected anyone to address him directly. I'm sorry, Dorothy continues, her words carrying the weight of years of unspoken observations. This doesn't seem right. The simple acknowledgement hits like a ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For a moment, Malik's composed facade cracks just slightly, revealing the man beneath the professional armor. Thank you, he says quietly, and the gratitude in his voice makes several people look away in shame. Tom Rodriguez watches the exchange with growing unease. In his years of security work, he's learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct is screaming that they're making a terrible mistake. But the momentum has carried them too far forward to turn back now. Malik reaches the door and pauses, his hand on the brass handle. He turns back to face the room, and for a moment, every person there feels the weight of his gaze. My name is Malik Jefferson, he says, his voice carrying to every corner of the bank. I want you all to remember that name. The threat, if it is a threat, is delivered with such quiet certainty that it sends a chill through the room. Sarah's hand trembles slightly as she reaches for her phone. Kevin Walsh's confidence wavers for the first time since the confrontation began. Malik pushes through the door and steps onto the sidewalk, the cool morning air hitting his face like a physical relief. Behind him, the bank's glass facade reflects his image back at him, a successful businessman who's just been ejected from a building like a common criminal. He walks to his car, a black Mercedes sedan parked at the meter, and places his briefcase carefully in the passenger seat. His hands are steady as he adjusts his rearview mirror, but his jaw is tight with controlled emotion. Inside the bank, the atmosphere remains tense and uncomfortable. Conversations resume slowly, in hushed tones, as if everyone is afraid to speak too loudly. Sarah returns to her desk, but her hands shake slightly as she tries to type. Tom Rodriguez positions himself by the window, watching Malik's car with the growing certainty that this situation is far from over. Kevin Walsh straightens his uniform and tries to project confidence, but something in Malik Jefferson's final words has lodged itself in his chest like a splinter. Remember that name, he'd said. Why would someone want them to remember his name unless... Dorothy Hamilton folds her newspaper and places it in her purse, her financial business suddenly seeming less important. She keeps replaying the moment when Malik looked at her, really looked at her, and she'd seen something that made her question everything she'd just witnessed. The clock on the wall shows 10:58 a.m. In 2 minutes, someone very important is supposed to arrive for a very important meeting about a very important acquisition. But what none of them realize, as they try to return to their normal routines, is that the man they just humiliated and expelled isn't driving away in defeat. He's simply moving his car to a better parking spot because in exactly 90 seconds, he's going to need to walk back through those doors. And when he does, the careful order of their world is about to collapse in ways that will make this morning's embarrassment look like a gentle breeze before a hurricane. At exactly 11 a.m., the bank's atmosphere shifts with the arrival of someone who commands immediate attention without saying a word. Margaret Chen, no relation to Marcus, steps through the revolving doors with the crisp efficiency of someone who measures her life in quarterly reports and board meetings. As regional director for First National's Eastern Division, she carries herself with the kind of authority that makes security guards straighten their postures and receptionists suddenly remember their customer service training. Margaret's steel-grey hair is pulled back in a perfect chignon. Her navy suit is tailored to intimidate, and her briefcase costs more than most people's monthly rent. She moves through the bank like a general inspecting troops, her sharp eyes cataloging every detail of the branch's operation. Sarah Mitchell feels her stomach drop the moment she recognizes Margaret's distinctive silhouette. Regional directors don't make unannounced visits to branch offices. They schedule appointments weeks in advance, send agendas, and expect red carpet treatment. Sarah's morning has already been stressful enough without this surprise inspection. "Good morning, Ms. Chen," Sarah manages, her voice pitched higher than usual with nervous energy. "We weren't expecting—" "I'm here for the Jefferson Group acquisition meeting," Margaret interrupts, her tone suggesting that explanations are unnecessary and delays are unacceptable. "Is Mr. Davidson ready?" The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Jefferson Group, the same acquisition that Mann had mentioned, the man they'd just escorted out of the building, the man whose name she can't quite shake from her memory. Yes, of course," Sarah stammers, reaching for her phone with hands that have developed a slight tremor. Mr. Davidson is in his office preparing for the meeting." Margaret checks her watch, a simple but expensive timepiece that probably costs more than Sarah's car. "Where is Mr. Jefferson? I was told he'd be here promptly at 11. The question lands in the middle of the bank's morning routine, like a grenade with a pulled pin. Jenny Walsh looks up from her computer screen, her face pale. Marcus Chen's fingers freeze over his keyboard. Tom Rodriguez, still positioned by the window, feels something cold settle in his stomach. "Mr. Jefferson?" Sarah's voice sounds like it's coming from underwater. "I'm sorry. Could you clarify which Mr. Jefferson you're referring to?" Margaret's eyebrows rise slightly, the first crack in her professional composure. "Malik Jefferson, CEO of Jefferson Holdings, the man who just acquired this branch." She pauses, studying Sarah's expression with the kind of scrutiny that has ended careers. "The man you should be treating like the most important client this bank has ever seen." The words echo through the marble-lined space like a death knell. "CEO, acquired this branch, most important client." Each phrase lands with devastating precision, and the collective realization spreads through the staff like poison through water. Kevin Walsh, who has been basking in the glow of his successful security intervention, feels the color drain from his face. The confident businessman he'd just thrown out of the building wasn't some scam artist or troublemaker. He was... "Oh, God," Jenny whispers, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Margaret's sharp eyes sweep the room, taking in the shell-shocked expressions, the uncomfortable silence, the way everyone seems to be avoiding eye contact. 25 years in corporate banking have taught her to read situations quickly, and what she's reading now makes her blood run cold. "Where," she asks, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is Mr. Jefferson now?" Sarah's mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. How do you explain to the regional director that you've just had security escort her most important client out of the building based on nothing more than suspicion and assumption? Tom Rodriguez steps forward, his years of experience telling him that someone needs to take control of this situation before it spirals completely out of control. "Ma'am, there was a misunderstanding about his appointment." A misunderstanding? Margaret's voice could cut glass. What kind of misunderstanding results in a CEO being absent from his own acquisition meeting? The question hangs in the air like an executioner's blade. David Kruger, the real estate developer who had been so impatient about conducting his own business, suddenly finds himself deeply interested in the financial documents spread across his lap. Dorothy Hamilton, who had tried to speak up for Malik, feels a sick weight settling in her chest as the full scope of what she'd witnessed becomes clear. Margaret pulls out her phone and dials with sharp, precise movements. "Malik, it's Margaret Chen. I'm at the branch, but I don't see you here." She pauses, listening, and her expression grows progressively darker. I see. No, don't worry about it. We'll reschedule." She ends the call and turns back to the assembled staff with an expression that could freeze fire. "Mr. Jefferson is sitting in his car outside because, apparently, your security team decided he was some kind of threat and escorted him out of the building." Kevin Walsh feels his career crumbling beneath his feet. "We were just following standard security protocols." Standard security protocols. Margaret's voice rises just enough to make everyone in the bank stop what they're doing. "For the CEO of the company that now owns this building? For the man who signs your paychecks?" The implications hit like a series of body blows. Owns this building, signs your paychecks. The man they'd humiliated and ejected isn't just a customer or even a VIP client. He's their boss, their actual literal boss. Sarah feels the room spinning around her. In her 5 years at the bank, she's never made a mistake this catastrophic. She's questioned the appointment of her own company's CEO. She's suggested he might be running some kind of scam. She's watched him be escorted out like a criminal. Margaret walks to the window where Tom Rodriguez has been standing, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of a countdown timer. She looks out at the black Mercedes sedan parked across the street, where Malik Jefferson sits with his hands folded in his lap, waiting. "Do you see that man?" she asks, her voice carrying just enough volume for everyone in the bank to hear. "That man controls a business empire worth over $2 billion. He employs over 15,000 people across 12 states. He just bought this bank to expand his financial services division." She turns back to face the room, and her expression is cold enough to make several people shiver. "And you threw him out like he was some kind of vagrant looking for a handout." The words land with devastating accuracy. Jenny Walsh begins to cry quietly at her desk. Marcus Chen stares at his computer screen without seeing it. Sarah feels her breakfast, threatening to make a reappearance. But Margaret isn't finished. Mr. Jefferson is not just wealthy, though he is extremely wealthy. He's not just successful, though he is remarkably successful. He is a man who has built his entire career on principles of dignity, respect, and giving people second chances. She pauses, letting that sink in. He's also a man who remembers every slight, every assumption, every moment when someone decided he didn't belong somewhere. Dorothy Hamilton feels tears welling in her eyes as she remembers Malik's face when she'd apologized to him, the gratitude in his voice when she'd acknowledged that something was wrong. She'd seen something good in that moment, something decent and forgiving. But she'd also seen something else. The look of a man who had experienced this kind of treatment before, who had learned not to be surprised by it, who carried the weight of other people's assumptions like a scar that never quite healed. Margaret checks her watch again. "Mr. Jefferson is giving me 5 minutes to decide whether this acquisition should proceed or whether he should find a different bank to purchase. 5 minutes to determine whether any of you deserve to keep your jobs." The countdown has begun, and everyone in the bank knows that their careers, their livelihoods, and their futures are balanced on the edge of a knife. But what none of them realize is that Malik Jefferson has already made his decision about what happens next. He's just waiting to see if anyone in that bank has the courage to walk outside and face him like a human being. The silence following Margaret's ultimatum stretches like a held breath, thick with the weight of careers hanging in the balance. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Malik Jefferson's Mercedes remains parked across the street, its dark silhouette a constant reminder of the catastrophic mistake that has just unfolded within these marble walls. Then, cutting through the tension like thunder after lightning, the bank's glass doors swing open with deliberate force. Malik Jefferson steps back into the building, but he is no longer alone. Behind him walks a woman in her early 40s, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun, carrying a leather portfolio that screams legal authority. She moves with the predatory grace of someone who has spent years dismantling corporate incompetence in courtrooms across the country. This is Janet Morrison, senior partner at Morrison, Blake & Associates, and her presence transforms the atmosphere from uncomfortable to potentially ruinous. Following Janet is a tall, distinguished black man in his 50s, whose expensive suit and confident bearing mark him as someone accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. Robert Williams, Jefferson Holdings' chief operating officer, surveys the bank's interior with the calculating gaze of someone mentally cataloging everything that will need to change under new management. The trio moves through the bank like a force of nature, their footsteps echoing against the marble with a rhythm that sounds almost military. Every conversation stops. Every phone call ends mid-sentence. Even the background hum of computers and printers seems to quiet in deference to their arrival. Sarah Mitchell feels her legs turn to liquid as she watches Malik approach her desk. The man she had dismissed as a potential security threat now commands the space around him like gravity itself has shifted in his favor. The expensive suit she had noticed but discounted suddenly looks like what it actually is, the uniform of someone who could buy and sell this entire building before lunch. "Good morning, Sarah," Malik says, his voice carrying the same quiet politeness he had used an hour ago, but now weighted with knowledge of what transpired. "I believe we have some unfinished business." Sarah's mouth opens, but no sound emerges. How do you apologize to someone for assuming they were a criminal when they're actually your boss? How do you explain that your entire worldview has just collapsed in the space of 60 minutes? Margaret Chen approaches the group with the careful steps of someone walking through a minefield. "Malik, I am profoundly sorry about this morning's incident. There's no excuse for what happened here." Malik's gaze moves slowly around the room, taking in every face that had watched his humiliation unfold. Jenny Walsh, who had whispered about scam artists, now stares at her hands as if they might provide escape from this nightmare. Marcus Chen, who had assumed the worst about Malik's presence, pretends to study financial reports that have become meaningless in the face of this revelation. "Ms. Chen," Malik acknowledges with a slight nod, "I appreciate your concern. However, I think it's important that we address what happened here systematically and thoroughly." Janet Morrison steps forward, opening her portfolio with movements that suggest she's done this dance many times before. "Mr. Jefferson has asked me to document this morning's events for potential legal review. We'll need to speak with everyone who was involved in the decision to remove him from the premises." The word legal cuts through the room like a blade. Kevin Walsh, who had been trying to blend into the background, feels his uniform suddenly feel like a target painted on his chest. Tom Rodriguez, despite his years of experience, finds himself questioning every decision he's made in his security career. "Legal review," David Kruger speaks up, his real estate developer's instincts for self-preservation kicking into overdrive. "I was just a customer here. I had nothing to do with any security decisions." Malik's eyes find David's across the room. "Ah, yes, the gentleman who was concerned about people with actual business to conduct." His voice carries no anger, but the memory of David's dismissive comment hangs in the air like an accusation. David's face flushes red as he realizes his casual cruelty has been catalogued and remembered. In business, he's learned that words have consequences, but he'd never imagined those consequences might involve the most powerful man in the room. Robert Williams surveys the bank's layout with the analytical gaze of someone already making operational changes. Malik, shall we proceed with the acquisition review? I have the integration team standing by, but given this morning's events, we may need to accelerate our timeline for personnel changes. Personnel changes. The euphemism sends a chill through every employee in the building. In corporate speak, personnel changes can mean anything from retraining to termination, from relocation to complete department restructuring. Dorothy Hamilton, who had tried to apologize to Malik during his forced departure, finds herself caught between relief that justice might be served and horror at the magnitude of what she'd witnessed. She watches as Malik moves through the space he now owns, and she realizes that this isn't just about one morning's mistake. This is about systems of assumption and prejudice that have been operating in plain sight for years. Before we proceed with any business, Malik says, his voice carrying to every corner of the bank, I think it's important that everyone understands exactly what happened here this morning. He moves to the center of the room, where an hour ago he had been surrounded by suspicion and hostility. Now that same space seems to bend around his presence, and every person in the building feels the shift in power dynamics like a change in atmospheric pressure. I walked into this bank as a customer with a scheduled appointment. Malik begins, his voice calm but carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. I was polite, professional, and patient. I provided my name, explained my purpose, and waited while your staff verified my appointment. Sarah feels each word like a physical blow, remembering her suspicious phone calls and deliberate delays. Instead of receiving the professional courtesy that any customer should expect, I was met with suspicion, questioned about my legitimacy, and ultimately escorted from the building by security personnel who assumed I posed some kind of threat. Kevin Walsh wants to disappear into the marble floor as Malik's gaze finds him across the room. The question I want everyone in this room to ask themselves, Malik continues, is simple. Would this have happened if I were white? The question lands like a physical weight, pressing down on every person in the building. It's the question that everyone has been avoiding, the uncomfortable truth that has been lurking beneath all the talk of security protocols and appointment verification. Jenny Walsh begins crying openly now, not from sadness, but from the crushing weight of recognition. She knows the answer to Malik's question. They all know the answer. The tragic irony, Malik says, his voice growing softer but somehow more powerful, is that while you were deciding I didn't belong here, I was actually coming here to invest in this community, to create jobs, to expand services, to build something better. He pauses, letting the full weight of that irony settle over the room like ash after a fire. But what I discovered instead is that this institution has a fundamental problem with recognizing worth, value, and belonging when they don't come packaged in the form you expect. Margaret Chen stands frozen, watching her carefully planned acquisition meeting transform into something that feels more like a reckoning. She knows that whatever happens in the next few minutes will determine not just the fate of this branch, but possibly the entire regional operation. Janet Morrison makes notes in her portfolio, her pen moving with the steady rhythm of someone documenting evidence. Each gesture, each word, each moment of recognition or denial is being catalogued for potential future use. And through it all, Malik Jefferson stands in the center of the room he now owns, surrounded by people who had judged him unworthy of basic respect, holding their futures in his hands like a judge preparing to render verdict. But what none of them realize is that Malik's decision about their fates has already been made. The question isn't whether there will be consequences. It's whether anyone in this room has the courage to face those consequences with the same dignity he showed when they threw him out. The weight of Malik's question, "Would this have happened if I were white?" settles over the bank like a heavy shroud, and the silence that follows is broken only by the soft sound of Jenny Walsh's quiet sobs and the distant hum of traffic outside. Every person in the room feels the truth of that question like a stone in their chest, because they all know the answer, even if no one wants to say it aloud. Robert Williams steps forward, his tablet in hand, the screen displaying what appears to be organizational charts and employee records. "Malik, we should discuss immediate operational changes. I have termination paperwork prepared for the individuals directly involved in this morning's incident." The word termination cuts through the air like a blade, and several people visibly flinch. Sarah's face goes completely white as she realizes that her banking career, 5 years of customer service training, performance reviews, and steady advancement, is about to end because of 15 minutes of terrible judgment. But Malik raises his hand, stopping Robert mid-sentence. "Hold on, Robert. I want to hear from them first." He turns his attention back to the assembled staff, his dark eyes moving from face to face with the patience of someone who has learned to read character in boardrooms and crisis situations. "I'm going to give each person who was involved in this morning's decision a chance to explain their actions. Not to save their jobs, that decision has already been made, but because I believe in the power of honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." Janet Morrison looks up from her legal notes, her eyebrows raised slightly. In her years of corporate crisis management, she's rarely seen executives give terminated employees a platform to speak. Most prefer swift, clean separations to avoid potential liability. But Malik Jefferson clearly operates by a different set of rules. "Sarah," Malik says, his voice carrying no malice but an expectation of truth, "you were the first person I spoke with this morning. What was going through your mind when I told you I had an appointment with Mr. Davidson?" Sarah feels every eye in the room focused on her, and the weight of that attention makes it difficult to breathe. Her hands shake as she grips the edge of her desk, trying to find words that might explain the inexplicable. I thought," she begins, then stops, realizing how her thoughts are going to sound when spoken aloud. "I thought something seemed off. You didn't look like—" Another pause, another moment of recognizing the trap her own honesty is creating. "I didn't look like what?" Malik prompts gently. "Like the other executives who come in here," Sarah finishes in a whisper. The admission hangs in the air like a confession, raw and uncomfortable in its honesty. David Kruger shifts in his chair, suddenly aware that Sarah's other executives category includes him, and the comparison makes him deeply uncomfortable. Malik nods slowly. "And what do those other executives look like, Sarah?" The question forces Sarah to confront the assumptions she's never had to articulate before. "They're usually older, and—" She trails off, unable to finish the sentence, because finishing it would require saying what everyone already knows. "White," Dorothy Hamilton says quietly from her chair in the waiting area. The elderly woman's voice carries across the marble space with surprising strength. "She means they're usually white." The word lands like a gavel strike, making the unspoken truth official. Sarah's face crumples as she realizes that a woman she doesn't even know has just articulated the prejudice that drove her actions. Malik turns his attention to Kevin Walsh, the young security guard who had been most aggressive in demanding his departure. "Kevin, when you told me I needed to leave, what made you so certain I was a threat?" Kevin's jaw works silently for several seconds before he manages to speak. The way you wouldn't just accept what we were telling you. Most people, when security asks them to leave, they just go. But you stood your ground like you had some kind of right to be here." "I see," Malik says. "And in your experience, what kind of people stand their ground when questioned by security?" Kevin's face flushes red as he realizes he's about to incriminate himself further. People who are hiding something, people who think the rules don't apply to them, or people who know they belong where they are, Malik suggests quietly. The distinction hits Kevin like a physical blow. He'd never considered that someone might refuse to leave because they had every right to be there, not because they were trying to get away with something. His entire framework for understanding the situation had been built on the assumption that Malik was an outsider trying to gain access to something he didn't deserve. Margaret Chen watches the interrogation unfold with growing horror. Each admission reveals another layer of systemic bias that she, as regional director, should have identified and addressed years ago. The failure isn't just individual, it's institutional, cultural, and deeply embedded in the way her staff has been trained to recognize and respond to different types of people. Tom Rodriguez, the senior security guard, finally finds his voice. "Mr. Jefferson, I want to apologize. I've been doing security work for over 20 years, and I should have known better. I let the situation escalate when I should have de-escalated it." Malik studies Tom's face for a long moment. "What should you have done differently, Tom?" "I should have asked you to wait while we contacted Mr. Davidson directly. I should have treated you with the same courtesy I'd give any other businessman. I should have—" Tom pauses, struggling with the admission. "I should have ignored what my partner was saying and followed my own instincts, which were that you weren't a threat, that something about this whole situation was wrong." The admission creates a ripple of discomfort through the room because it reveals that even the most experienced person present had sensed the injustice but failed to act on it. Jenny Walsh raises her head from her hands, her makeup streaked with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "I said things. I made assumptions. I've never been more ashamed of myself in my life." Malik's expression softens slightly as he looks at Jenny's genuine distress. "What assumptions did you make, Jenny?" "I thought you were trying to scam us. I whispered to Marcus that you were probably one of those people who dress up nice and try to get information or money." Her voice breaks on the words. "I judged you based on nothing but my own prejudices, and I'm so sorry." Marcus Chen, who had been hoping to avoid direct questioning, realizes he can't hide behind his computer screen any longer. "I didn't say anything," he offers weakly. "No," Malik agrees. "You didn't say anything. You didn't do anything. You watched a fellow human being get mistreated and remain silent. Is that better or worse than actively participating?" The question cuts deep because it forces Marcus to confront his own complicity. In his mind, staying neutral had felt safe, almost moral. But Malik's question reframes his silence as its own form of action, a choice to enable injustice through inaction. Robert Williams checks his tablet again. "Malik, we're running behind schedule for the integration meeting with the legal team." But Malik isn't finished. His gaze finds David Kruger, who has been trying to shrink into his chair while maintaining the pretense of reviewing financial documents. "David!" Malik says, his voice carrying the weight of remembered insult. "You seemed particularly concerned about people with actual business to conduct. What made you so certain my business wasn't actual?" David's real estate developer instincts tell him to deflect, to minimize, to find some way to reframe his comments as misunderstood rather than malicious. But under Malik's steady gaze, those instincts crumble. "I assumed," David begins, then stops. "I made the same assumptions everyone else made, and I was wrong, completely wrong." "But you weren't just wrong," Malik presses. "You were comfortable being wrong. You were confident in your wrongness. What gave you that confidence?" The question forces David to confront something he's never had to examine before, the casual privilege that allows him to make snap judgments about other people's worthiness without ever having to question those judgments. "I don't know," David admits, and for the first time in his professional life, that admission feels like the most honest thing he's ever said. Janet Morrison closes her portfolio with a soft snap that sounds like a period at the end of a sentence. The documentation is complete, the admissions are recorded, and the legal foundation for whatever comes next has been established with devastating thoroughness. But as Malik Jefferson surveys the room full of people who have just confessed their biases, their assumptions, and their failures, his expression isn't one of satisfaction or revenge. Instead, there's something that looks almost like sadness, the weight of understanding that this morning's events aren't an aberration, but a pattern, not a mistake, but a system operating exactly as designed. And now comes the moment when he must decide what justice looks like, in a world where admitting wrong is the first step toward making it right. Malik Jefferson stands in the center of the bank, surrounded by the confessions and admissions that have laid bare the ugly truth of systematic bias. The silence that follows their revelations is heavy with expectation. Everyone waiting for judgment, for punishment, for the swift justice that corporate power usually delivers without mercy or nuance. But instead of pronouncing sentence, Malik does something unexpected. He walks to one of the leather chairs in the customer waiting area and sits down, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The simple act transforms him from judge back to human being, and the shift in energy is palpable. 23 years ago, Malik begins, his voice carrying the weight of memory, I was a senior at Howard University, interviewing for entry-level positions at financial firms. I had a 3.9 GPA, internship experience, and glowing recommendations from professors. I was hungry, ambitious, and absolutely convinced that merit would be enough. Robert Williams and Janet Morrison exchange glances, recognizing the cadence of a story that has shaped their friend and colleague in ways most people never see. I walked into a bank in downtown DC, not so different from this one actually, wearing my best suit, carrying my resume, ready to change my life. The security guard stopped me before I made it 10 feet inside, asked if I was there to open a checking account or apply for a loan. When I said I was there for an interview, he asked to see my invitation letter. Sarah feels her stomach twist as she recognizes the parallel to this morning's events. The details are different, but the underlying assumption is exactly the same. I showed him the letter. He read it twice, then asked me to wait while he verified my appointment. 15 minutes later, the hiring manager came out, a white woman about my age, and apologized profusely. Said there had been a miscommunication with security. Malik's eyes find each person in the room as he continues. I got the job, worked there for 3 years. Every single day, that same security guard looked at me like I was still trying to get away with something. Every single day, I had to prove I belonged there. Tom Rodriguez feels each word like a physical weight. 22 years of security work, and he's never considered how his standard protocols might feel to someone who experiences them repeatedly, systematically, throughout their professional life. The bank eventually promoted me to branch manager, Malik continues. The day I got that promotion, the security guard who had questioned my right to be there came to my office. He apologized, said he'd learned something about assumptions and wanted to do better. Kevin Walsh looks up sharply, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. Do you know what I told him? Malik asks the room. Several people lean forward unconsciously, hanging on his words. I thanked him. Not because his apology erased 3 years of daily humiliation, but because acknowledgement of wrong is the first step toward making it right. Dorothy Hamilton feels tears welling in her eyes as she remembers her own small attempt to acknowledge wrongness this morning, and Malik's grateful response. Malik stands and begins walking slowly around the room, his hands clasped behind his back. The question I've been wrestling with for the past hour isn't whether you all made mistakes. You did. It isn't whether those mistakes were rooted in racial bias. They were. The question is, what do we do with that truth? Margaret Chen finds herself holding her breath, realizing that the next few minutes will determine not just the fate of her staff, but the entire culture of her region's operations. I could fire everyone who participated in this morning's events, Malik says, his voice matter of fact. I have the legal right, the moral justification, and the corporate authority to clean house completely. The room goes dead silent, except for the sound of Jenny's quiet crying. I could also use this as a teaching moment, not just for this branch, but for the entire banking industry. The story of the black CEO thrown out of his own bank would make headlines. It would spark conversations. It might even change policies. Janet Morrison looks up from her notes, sensing a shift in direction she hadn't anticipated. But what would either of those approaches actually accomplish? Malik asks, stopping in front of Sarah's desk. Would firing you make you less likely to make assumptions about people who don't look like you, or would it just make you more careful about getting caught? Sarah's breath catches as she realizes he's asking her a real question, not a rhetorical one. I think I've learned something today that I'll never forget, she whispers. Not because I might lose my job, but because I saw what my assumptions can do to another human being. Malik nods slowly. Kevin, same question. If I fire you today, what lesson do you take from this experience? Kevin struggles to find words that don't sound like he's begging for his job. That I need to think before I act. That someone's refusal to be intimidated might mean they have every right to stand their ground, not that they're hiding something. Tom? That my instincts were right this morning and I should have trusted them. That experience without wisdom is just repetition. Jenny, that staying silent when something is wrong makes me part of the problem. Her voice grows stronger. That I need to examine my own biases instead of assuming I don't have any. Malik continues around the room, and each person's answer reveals not just understanding of their mistake, but genuine grappling with the deeper implications of their actions. When he finishes, Malik returns to the center of the room. Here's what I've decided. Sarah, you're suspended without pay for 2 weeks. You'll spend that time in mandatory bias training, not because I want to punish you, but because I want you to understand how your assumptions affect real people's lives. Sarah nods, relief and determination mixing in her expression. Kevin, you're terminated. The words hit like a physical blow, and Kevin's face goes completely white. But, Malik continues, if you're willing to complete a comprehensive training program on implicit bias and conflict de-escalation at your own expense, I'll consider rehiring you in 6 months in a different capacity. Hope flickers back to life in Kevin's eyes. Tom, you're receiving a formal reprimand, but you're also being promoted to head of security training for all branches. Your job will be to ensure this never happens again anywhere in our system. Tom straightens, understanding that he's being given a chance to transform his failure into systemic change. Jenny and Marcus, you're both enrolling in our new diversity and inclusion training program. Not as punishment, but as the first participants in an initiative you'll help design and implement. Margaret Chen feels something loosening in her chest as she realizes that Malik isn't just dealing with this morning's crisis. He's using it as a foundation for institutional transformation. And David, Malik says, turning to the real estate developer, you're banned from this branch for 1 year. When you return, you'll need to complete a customer sensitivity course before we'll serve you. David nods mutely, understanding that he's getting off easily considering his casual cruelty. The reality is, Malik says, addressing the entire room, that bias isn't something you fix with a single conversation or even a single firing. It's something you commit to examining and changing every single day, in every single interaction, for the rest of your professional life. He pauses, looking around at faces that have been transformed by the morning's events, some by shame, some by understanding, some by hope. This bank is going to become a model for how financial institutions can serve all communities with dignity and respect. Not because we're perfect, but because we're committed to getting better. The silence that follows feels different from the uncomfortable quiet that has dominated the morning. This silence contains possibility, the weight of serious commitment, and the first stirrings of real change. But Malik isn't finished. His final words will determine whether this moment becomes a footnote in corporate history or the beginning of something genuinely transformative. 6 months later, Dorothy Hamilton walks through the same glass doors of First National Bank, but the atmosphere that greets her is fundamentally different. The marble floors still gleam, the teller windows still sparkle, but there's something in the air that wasn't there before, a warmth, an attentiveness, a sense that every person who enters is seen as a human being worthy of respect. Behind the reception desk, Sarah Mitchell looks up with a genuine smile that reaches her eyes. 6 months of intensive training, community service at local minority-owned businesses, and daily reflection on her own unconscious biases have transformed more than just her professional approach. They've changed how she sees the world. "Good morning, Mrs. Hamilton," Sarah says, her voice carrying the kind of warmth that comes from understanding rather than mere politeness. "How can I help you today?" Dorothy notices the difference immediately. Gone is the practiced customer service smile that used to flicker based on assumptions about who deserved attention. In its place is something authentic, something that acknowledges her not just as a customer, but as a person with dignity and worth. At the security station, Tom Rodriguez reviews training materials for the afternoon's bias awareness session with the regional team. His promotion to head of security training has taken him to branches across 3 states, where he shares the story of a morning that changed everything, not as a cautionary tale about corporate liability, but as a testament to the power of honest self-reflection and systematic change. The young man standing beside him, Marcus Thompson, is Kevin Walsh's replacement, a recent graduate of the comprehensive training program that has become the gold standard for financial security protocols. Marcus learned Kevin's story during his training, not as an example of what not to do, but as proof that people can grow beyond their mistakes when given the opportunity and guidance to do so. Kevin himself now works for a community organization that provides de-escalation training to businesses across the city. The 6 months he spent examining his own biases, learning about the history of systemic discrimination, and developing new approaches to conflict resolution transformed his understanding of what security actually means. When Malik offered him a different position within the company as a trainer rather than a guard, Kevin discovered that his real calling was teaching others to recognize the difference between actual threats and personal assumptions. Jenny Walsh and Marcus Chen have become unlikely leaders in the bank's diversity and inclusion initiative. Their morning conversations now center around analyzing customer interaction data, identifying patterns that might reveal unconscious bias, and developing new protocols to ensure every client receives equitable treatment. Jenny's transformation has been particularly profound. The woman who once whispered about scam artists now mentors other employees on recognizing and interrupting their own prejudicial thinking. The waiting area where Dorothy sits contains something that wasn't there 6 months ago, a wall of photographs showcasing the diverse communities the bank serves, along with stories of local business owners, students, and families whose dreams have been supported by Jefferson Holdings's expanded commitment to inclusive financial services. One photograph shows a young black woman receiving a business loan to open her restaurant. Another features an elderly Latino man celebrating the mortgage approval that allowed him to buy his first home at age 63. A third captures a group of refugee entrepreneurs whose market stall cooperative received microfinancing support. Each image tells a story of dignity recognized, potential realized, and assumptions overcome. Margaret Chen enters the bank carrying herself with the same professional authority as always, but now that authority is tempered with something that wasn't there before: humility. The regional director, who once measured success purely in profit margins and efficiency metrics, now includes equity assessments in every quarterly review. Her leadership style has evolved from command and control to mentorship and accountability. She approaches Sarah's desk with a warm nod. "How did this morning's community outreach meeting go?" "Wonderful," Sarah replies, her enthusiasm genuine. "We signed up 15 new small business accounts, and Mr. Rodriguez's security presentation really resonated with the other bank representatives. I think we're going to see some real changes across the industry." Through the window, a familiar black Mercedes pulls up to the curb. Malik Jefferson steps out, but his arrival no longer creates the subtle tension it once might have. Instead, there's a sense of pride among the staff, not because he's wealthy or powerful, but because he represents the possibility of transformation, the proof that systems can change when people commit to doing better. As Malik enters the bank, every employee he passes offers a greeting that's both professional and genuinely warm. These aren't the forced pleasantries of people trying to impress their boss. They're the acknowledgements of colleagues who have worked together to build something better than what existed before. Sarah stands as Malik approaches her desk. "Good morning, Mr. Jefferson. Ms. Chen is waiting for you in the conference room, and I have the community impact reports you requested." "Thank you, Sarah." Malik replies, and in that simple exchange, there's a recognition of shared journey, of mistakes acknowledged and growth achieved. But perhaps the most significant change isn't visible in any individual interaction or policy adjustment. It's in the way Dorothy Hamilton feels as she conducts her banking business, not just comfortable, but genuinely valued. The elderly woman who once witnessed an injustice and found the courage to speak up has watched that small act of moral courage ripple outward into systematic change. As she prepares to leave, Dorothy approaches Sarah's desk one more time. "I wanted to thank you," she says quietly. Sarah looks puzzled. "For what, Mrs. Hamilton?" "For proving that people can change. For showing that one terrible morning can become the foundation for something beautiful." Sarah's eyes fill with tears, not of shame this time, but of gratitude for the opportunity to become better than she was. In the conference room, Malik reviews reports that tell a story of transformation, measured not just in diversity statistics or bias training completion rates, but in the lived experiences of customers who now feel truly welcome in spaces that once excluded them. The numbers are impressive. Customer satisfaction up 40%, community lending increased by 300%, employee retention at an all-time high. But the real victory is in the individual stories of dignity restored and potential realized. Robert Williams joins the meeting carrying news of expansion plans. "The model we've developed here is being requested by financial institutions across the country," he reports. "Everyone wants to know how we transformed a crisis into a catalyst for industry-wide change." Janet Morrison, now serving as Jefferson Holdings' Chief Diversity Officer, adds her perspective. "The legal framework we've created isn't just about avoiding discrimination lawsuits. It's about proactively creating environments where everyone can thrive." As the meeting progresses, the conversation centers not on past mistakes, but on future possibilities, new programs to support minority-owned businesses, partnerships with community organizations, initiatives to address generational wealth gaps, and innovations in inclusive banking practices. The transformation that began with one morning's humiliation has grown into something much larger. Proof that when people are willing to examine their biases honestly and commit to systematic change, they can create institutions that serve everyone with dignity and respect. Outside, Kevin Walsh leads a group of security professionals from various businesses through a training exercise in the parking lot, teaching them to recognize the difference between legitimate security concerns and discriminatory assumptions. His journey from the guard who removed Malik Jefferson to the trainer helping others avoid the same mistake embodies the possibility of redemption through genuine growth. As the sun sets over the city, the bank's glass facade reflects not just the building's exterior, but something deeper, the transformation of an institution that learned to see beyond surface assumptions, to recognize the full humanity of everyone who walks through its doors. The story that began with the question, "Would this have happened if I were white?" has evolved into an answer, "No, it wouldn't have. But more importantly, it won't happen again." Because sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't revenge or punishment, but the patient, persistent work of building something better. If this story touched you, share in the comments what moved you most. And send this video to someone who needs to hear this message today.